experiencing homelessness are indigenous. And of course, the indigenous population is only 2.5%. So, they're suffering quite disproportionately. Same issue, like 60% racialized. And that is, of course, disproportionate suffering as well. So maybe you could help us understand why those communities in particular are suffering such disproportionate homelessness.
Sure. And I would add indigenous folks are also overrepresented in the homeless population.
Yeah, that was the first number I gave.
Sorry. So those are structural causes. So it's racism, it's deinstitutionalization, it's colonialism. In certain sectors, it's about intimate partner violence. So, women fleeing abusive situations. So the reasons, they're structural.
Gotcha.
And
this feels like a particularly timely time to ask this question. It was minus 20 the other day. How does anybody survive in the streets when it's minus 20?
Yeah, it's hard for any of us to imagine. And I struggle with it since we have, here over 20% of our guys are sleeping rough. It's amazing to me that we don't see more deaths. Although we have seen a record, 2021 was a record breaker for people who died that were homeless. As a matter of fact, today in Toronto, we have a monthly memorial for people who have died homeless. And they're seeing quadrupling of the numbers of people that are being added to that memorial. And last year in the shelter system in Toronto, over 180 people died that were homeless. So, and outreach programs are out there, but they're, like many services, they're a patch quilt. We have, Streets to Homes, which is the city program, which is a couple of vans and some folks running around into ravines and parks and encampments. There are a few agencies, Salvation Army does it, a couple of our Aboriginal partners are out there. But in a city as large as Toronto, it's hard to have, and we don't really have adequate outreach that can get to all of these people. But
Lauro, I would have to assume that if somebody on a night where it's minus 20 doesn't want to go to a shelter, they believe that the shelters are even worse than sleeping outdoors in minus 20?
Yep, I would absolutely agree. Yes, I
so
have
what's
many
going on
men.
In the shelters that would be that awful that it's better to sleep outdoors in minus 20?
Yeah, well, for older men particularly, it's their vulnerability. I routinely hear every day almost men coming here saying that they were assaulted, they were robbed of their possessions, and the pandemic and COVID has created and exacerbated that problem. It's part of the reason, in Toronto, for most of your viewers, we've had issues with encampments, is because people would rather be outdoors than have to go into shelters. Prior to the pandemic, many of our men, I have guys who have been here for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I have a few that have been here over a decade that have never, ever gone indoors in a shelter. And in Toronto, we had a 30-year temporary program where faith groups used to open up their basements, called the Out of the Cold program. And they were shut down during the pandemic. And many of our men used those programs because they felt safer in those faith group basements rather than having to go. But those were eliminated. So, it's a hard choice. It's a choice I couldn't fathom to make, but yeah.
But if they drop into your place, if they drop into your haven, what are they going to experience there?
Well, they're going to experience safety and a welcoming environment that treats them with a lot of dignity, which is not what they always get wherever they go. So we provide the basics of necessity. We provide showers, we provide food, we provide laundry. We have nursing services here. We have counselors who, don't do clinical counseling, but what we do is what we call system navigation. We help the men kind of navigate everything from where to get a bed for the night, how to apply for social assistance, deal with the maze of bureaucracy that these men have to face just to get their lives back on track. And we provide a communal space where, you know, they can belong, where they feel safe. You know, especially with older men, you know, safety is probably the most important aspect. It's why they like coming here, is because for 9 hours out of the day, they don't have to worry about being assaulted. They have a level of engagement with peers who are in similar circumstances. They can hang out, watch TV, shoot a game of pool.
But you can't put them up overnight, is that right?
No, drop-in centers were basically created decades ago to fill the void, because pre-pandemic shelters were basically a bed for the night, and out in the morning you go, come back tonight, and you'll get another bed maybe. So drop-in centers were kind of created to fill these voids. What do people do during the day? You know, so we provide a space, but there's a purpose to the space that we have here, and it becomes their community center. They often refer to this place as their home. I don't refer to it as their home because I don't think this is a home, but they feel that strongly. This is a place where they're valued, where they're respected, and they can have 9 hours where they don't have to spend worrying about their own personal safety, and they have people who help them in whatever way they choose to want to get help, whether that's getting housing, whether that's seeing the nurse for a medical issue. You know, one of the big barriers that older men face is there are barriers to getting healthcare when you're homeless.
Sure. Now, what about, just in our last minute here, Lauro, I can't imagine how you did what you did during COVID-19. How did you keep your doors open and yet keep people masked and separated and a safe environment and all that?
Yeah, well, you know, it's an overused word, but we pivoted constantly. You know, I heard somebody yesterday use the phrase, it was like planning in quicksand. So we've done whatever we've had to do. You know, we rented a huge tent and put it out in our courtyard so we could provide services outdoors by and large. You know, the only thing that we weren't able to do so far in the pandemic was provide that communal space. But we're continuing to provide hot meals. We're continuing to see people outside. We're allowing limited groups in to see the nurse, to see counseling, to do showers, to do dining. So we've done everything to still be here. And I'm always stunned at how appreciative the men are that we're still here, because there are many in the community that are not operating.
Lauro, I want to thank you for spending so much time with us here tonight on TVO and telling us how you do what you do. Everything about you is admirable, with the exception, of course, of that logo over your right shoulder, which I've tried very hard to ignore over the last 20 or so minutes. But thanks for joining us on TVO tonight. Take good care.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Residential schools sought to eliminate Indigenous identities. The Indian Act seeks to legally define them. And as communities themselves endeavor to carry on their own culturally defined terms, in recent years, some high-profile cases have emerged of people claiming Indigenous ancestry that they did not really have. With us to explore the question of who can claim to be Indigenous, can we welcome, as is our custom, from furthest away to closest to our studio, starting in Williams Lake, British Columbia, with Catherine Hensel. She is founding partner and principal lawyer at Hensel Barristers. In Wakefield, Quebec, Veldon Coburn, professor of Indigenous Studies at the University of Ottawa's Institute of Indigenous Research and Studies. And in Ottawa, Ontario, Gahande Horn-Miller, Assistant Vice President of Indigenous Initiatives and a professor at Carleton University. And we're delighted to have you three on this program tonight. Normally, I just fire off a first question to get us going, but I think we ought not to miss a potential educational opportunity here to do the introductions again. And maybe this time, you would all be good enough to introduce yourselves in using your Indigenous names and which nation you belong to, and doing it in the language that is consistent with your indigeneity. Let's see how this goes. Catherine, you want to start us off?
Shem Steve, Waikikwe Catherine Hensel Rinsquest. I am Secwepemc, a citizen of the Secwepemc Nation, and I'm actually coming to you from Secwepemc, our territory and our nation.
Wonderful.
Cruikshank.
Veldon Coburn, how about you?
Kwe Miigwech, I'm Veldon Coburn. I'm from the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan, and I'm coming to you live from my own territory here on Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation territory, just outside of Ottawa.
Gahonde.
Gahonde Yuja, Sakskarde, what ni I Ganyaptahaga, Neonjodo, what Ganoradun Danazogweko. I'm Gahonde Horn Miller, I'm Bear Clan, I'm Ganyaptahaga, and I'm a guest here in unceded Algonquin territory.
And the language you just spoke was?
Ganyageha, or also known as Mohawk.
Wonderful. Thank you for indulging me in that. I thought that was an interesting and different way to start our program. All right, let's get started. Catherine, what is the definition of who is Indigenous?
Well, that's a broad question with a bunch of different answers depending on where you're coming from. But I think generally, people who are not only consider themselves to be and identify themselves as members of a nation and a culture, but also are claimed by and acknowledged by the people of that nation and culture, whether it's through their family, the leadership, elders, and have a connection to, if they are able, have a connection to that community and culture. And it varies as well, depending on which nation you're from, which culture, who can claim to be a member. For Secwepemc people, if you have a drop of Secwepemc blood, then you are Secwepemc.
All right, Veldon, is there anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think that, when Catherine mentions that it's something that's who's claimed, I look at it from a political lens, is that these are political communities where we have citizenship. It comes with a set of rights and also attendant responsibilities. But the matter of being claimed, that's something that most nations adhere to themselves. When being claimed, we typically hold identification from the issuing government itself. So the passport, which has become very popular, you used to be able to cross borders through ports of entry into the United States, for example, from Canada with just a driver's license. But in the post 9/11 world, you have to present the documentation issued by the nation that claims you, which is the guarantee, which is now the passport. So you have to be claimed and provided with that sort of guarantee to outside authorities.
Gahonde, is there general agreement among the many hundreds of First Nations in Canada as to what constitutes indigeneity?
I think we have multiple similarities within our own traditional governance systems that we use. Of course, as my colleagues here have stated, it is about who claims you, but it's also too about who you are responsible and accountable to, because there's things that you have to live up to in order to be a part of that community, but you have to, in a sense, prove or live up to those responsibilities, and it's a lifelong thing. It's not just a one-off. So if a community is claiming you, then you have to follow through. The whole reason why I said in the beginning of the intro, I wanted to point out was about the fact that I placed myself. And I think that's where the very starting point is. If you go into any Indigenous community as an Indigenous person, the very first question that you are asked is, who's your mother and who's your father? And that is about placing you. That is about who claims you. So when I do my traditional greeting, that's about situating myself and letting those others know who has claimed me, who am I a part of, who is my family, who is my clan, who is my community. And so there's those unspoken things that we do that are common throughout Indigenous communities and Indigenous nations that set the tone and allow us to be placed.
Veldon, maybe let me use an analogy of religion here, and you tell me how far this sort of goes or doesn't go. For example, if somebody wants to convert to
Judaism, or they want to convert to Christianity or Catholicism. You go through the process, you do it, and once you've converted, I mean, quote unquote, you're in. Does it work the same way in the Indigenous world?
Well, under the current constraints, it's far more difficult to do that. There are processes for, and in many, even under Indian Act banned systems, where there are custom citizenship and membership codes for people who are racially non-Indigenous, those who might not have blood, to become members and citizens within our nations. I know people who are citizens that have been, brought in, and not through sort of like hokey procedures of adoption, but what we would understand is naturalization, and those procedures had existed before, just as any other political community around the world would have. A good colleague of ours that we work with, Dr. Damien Lee, and he's been very public about it, is racially not at all Indigenous. He's racially a white man, but is a citizen of the Anishinaabe, larger Anishinaabe nation, but for his particular First Nation as well, is been accepted through their custom governance system. So it's not something you could pick up on the fly and self-identify. So there is still the matter of having the institution claim you. So we do see at the outset, when you were giving the introduction, is that people are making these claims, but it's not in accordance with the rules. It's not a soup kitchen, and it's not fast and loose. I can't pick up a book and start, I don't know, picking up and praying to whatever deity it may be and thinking that I am that religion. And or maybe the analogy fails at that point, but I think I'll just leave it at that matter, that there are more rigid rules that entail governance, but unfortunately they've been eroded, and we're trying to rebuild them at these times with our systems of governments.
Right. We'll go on actually to talk later in our conversation about some of the examples that you just referenced, but I guess we should say Damien Lee was adopted by an Indigenous family, which was why he was, I see you nodding, Veldon, which is why he was welcomed in that circumstance. Let me ask Catherine, though, are you recognized at the moment as a member of your First Nation?
I'm recognized, it's my understanding anyway, I'm recognized by the Secwepemc people as Secwepemc. I am not a status Indian. I'm not registered therefore on any banned lists within our territory. None of my antecedents have ever been held status under the Indian Act. We know who our families. When I walk into a Secwepemc gathering or community, I identify who my family is, the family lines that I come from, and I'm thereby recognized. I know my relatives.
But are you not on the list because you grew up so far away from Secwepemc territory?
No, there's people outside of our territory who are on the list, and I certainly have cousins who, have comparable ancestry who have sought and obtained Indian status. It's a choice 3-4 generations ago within my family to not necessarily move outside the territory initially. They did eventually, but to step outside of that system as it was being set up in our territory. And to the best of my knowledge, none of my direct antecedents or ancestors ever held Indian status. So
and are you trying to claim that status now?
No. There's my citizenship is between me and my people and my nation, and I don't consider it subject to the discretion of a minister, Canadian member of cabinet. As you saw with Lynn Gale's story, the rules applied to it are arbitrary, or not even arbitrary in some cases. Kind of a sinister colonial construct. I don't really want to make my grandchildren's identity and citizenship subject to that system.
Okay, let's play a clip at this stage here, because we want to do a plug for a TVO original series called Unsettled, which is the story of a woman who was taken from her Northern Ontario territory during the 60s scoop. She found her family. She is trying to, quote unquote, reclaim her ancestry. So let's have a look at that clip. Sheldon, if you would.
First, I want to thank my mother, Molly, for never giving up hope. I think your prayers gave me the strength to go on this journey and find my way back home. Also, miigwech to all of you. for being here and supporting my family as we begin this journey together. I was very lucky. I grew up in a loving home, and I have 2 beautiful children.
You're not welcome here.
Gahande, if someone wants to reclaim their Indigenous ancestry, should they?
Boy, that's a big question. That's a loaded question. I think that, you know, traditionally, we're not in a position right now, I think, within our own communities to answer that question fully. You know, with the implications of the Indian Act system on our traditional governance practices, it has deeply eroded the systems that we already had in place many generations ago to address these kinds of issues. I think that there's a lot of disunity in our communities that comes out of the implications of what we've experienced through time with the issue of the imposition of another system of governance on our peoples.
Just help us understand why that question is so fraught. Yeah, help us understand why that's such a fraught question.
Because it relates to the issue of money, and it relates to the issue of land and territory and sovereignty. And we're in such a state right now that we are in no way ready to answer that. You know, right now, we are just, you know, struggling to address questions around missing and murdered Indigenous women. We're struggling to address issues of, you know, addictions, survival, the very issue of survival in our own communities, clean water. And the identity question is something that is there. It's been there for a long time, and it's a very difficult one to answer. But there's many other things that are pressing on the ground that we need to address. And this whole identity question just adds to that mess, is what I would call it.
It's certainly a very complex issue, as Drew Hayden Taylor, the playwright, described in his recent piece in the Globe and Mail. Veldon is smiling already because he knows where we're going next. So let me read an excerpt from that column, and then we're going to come back and chat. Sheldon, the graphic, if you would. Most people, he wrote, in the Indigenous community are actually not fond of the quote-unquote blood quantum issue, or the degree to which an individual can prove a certain amount of Indigenous blood. It's unreliable and misleading, but many believe it's still better than nothing. You have to start somewhere. Let's unpack this. Veldon, blood quantum, what is that?
It's a really insidious form of constructing an arbitrary cutoff on who's Indigenous and who's not. So for the longest time, and even there's sort of in a de facto way, the Indian Act has a blood quantum. It doesn't come out and explicitly say it. So basically it is a quantum. It's a quantum measurement of blood. It could be expressed in percentages or fractions, so degrees of being mixed. In the Indian Act, as it currently stands from the amendment in 1985, is if you mix, and you know, it's a larger discussion too, but there is a calculus behind it. If you mix too many times, and what we understand now being the second generation cutoff, you know, so if you have like a status Indian who mixes, there's 2 generations of mixing with non-status, that's the end of it for status itself. But you know, you'll hear sort of turns of phrases of being I'm a full-blooded Indian, or I'm half, or they may be off the cuff themselves, but when they're worked into citizenship codes and membership, or at least the statutes and the laws that are imposed upon us by the state, it's very insidious. It's what you might call, and it's used another turn of phrase amongst ourselves, arithmetic genocide, is that it just basically creates the terminal end of when you've breeded yourself out of existence.
Catherine, what's your view on it?
Yeah, I agree. Like, in order to continue to exist as peoples, you need a bunch of things. You need territory, you need culture, you need language, but first and foremost, you need people. And the Indian Act status regime is systematically and methodically and intentionally reduces the number of people down to nothing in some cases. So you know, as I said earlier, I don't want to make either my own citizenship, my children's citizenship, or my nation's ability to claim us subject to that. And the path, of course, is for nations to reclaim jurisdiction, exclusive jurisdiction, about how they define citizenship, and the rights and obligations that come from citizenship. And it'll be different. Like I know with Haudenosaunee nations and the citizenship regimes around there, they're very different than what I think the Secwepemc citizenship system and law and jurisdiction, how that would be exercised. And that's as it should be. We are different people. We have different laws.
You mentioned, Catherine, that language ought to be a part of it. And I know you are, at least I think I know, you're trying to learn Secwepemc right now, or Secwepemc Tsin, as the language is called.
Secwepemc yeah.
Chin.
Yeah.
How are you managing?
I'd say, they say for a language like Secwepemc for an English speaker, it's about 5,000 hours. And I believe that to be true. I'm probably about 1,000 hours in, let's put it that way.
So you got a way to go.
I'm a toddler, linguistically, I'd say.
Gahande, you sounded absolutely perfectly fluent in your language when I asked you to introduce yourself off the top. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, I spoke only Gonyogeha until I was 5 or 6. And when my mother moved us to Ottawa for work, we were placed into the school system that forced us to begin to learn French and English. And I lost a lot of my language. But since I started having children, I've taken the time to begin to reenact the language in my family. And so that legacy of the language is still there. So I can read it and I can pronounce it. And but the actual memorization of certain terminology and concepts is still very difficult for me. But it's there. And that's why I sound quite fluent, because I'm getting there.
How interested or not are your children in picking this up as well?
Very interested. My eldest is fluent speaker. And my other two, one of them has a child and she's beginning to practice it with her daughter. And then my youngest is beginning to see an interest in it.
Okay. Veldon, let me ask you about a case that you're researching right now. Membership with your own First Nation, which involves the city of Ottawa as well. Big treaty, membership of more than 1,000 people. What's happening with all of that?
So this will go to the question of ancestry and who can claim to be members of political communities for exercising rights and modifying territorial title. So as Catherine says, nations, and it's basically the international Westphalian model too, of nations of having jurisdiction over a people within a bounded territory. So constituting the body politic, who are the citizens, they're the ones that have the rights to modify and make sort of changes to how they constitute themselves. This is the sort of same thing that goes all around the world. For example, and just to preface what's going on in the Algonquin Nation in Ontario, because it is the largest modern treaty in Ontario's history, very close to concluding within a couple of years anyways, and 38 years underway, 30 years of negotiations at the moment for 36,000 square kilometers, is that we have individuals who are claiming to be Algonquin solely for the purposes of modifying Algonquin territorial title. Because it's unceded, we've never had a territorial treaty. We may have diplomacy treaties with the Crown from several centuries ago, but nothing that modifies the territory. And when I think about what they're doing, is they have individuals coming out of the woodwork claiming an ancestor from the 1600s, and that being sufficient to extinguish and modify my rights and our collective title. Now, I also have a great-grandfather that's, well, 3 times great-grandfather that married one of my great-great-grandmothers from Scotland. And a few years ago, that was an insufficient basis for me to modify or participate in their independence referendum. And that was a significant move that a citizen can take and engage with the state to modify territorial integrity and their relations with other nations. So what we have here is a number of individuals coming out. And in fact, the research that we had done showed that they were forging documents from the 19th and 18th century, so early 1800s, late 1700s, And there's a number of individuals that are reliant upon this, over 1,000. The number is actually much higher now, but my little community has been drowned out in democratic numbers when it comes time to ratifying the final agreement, because they did ratify the agreement in principle in 2016, the culmination of 25 years of negotiations. Which,
okay, let me jump in with a follow-up then. If these descendants are legally recognized, what do you think's at stake?
Well, the ability to maintain ourselves as a nation with a recognized territorial foundation for us. We're not sovereignists and we're not separatists. We still want to exercise our rights, but as it's going, those individuals that come out, they vote overwhelmingly to extinguish our rights and title. So it'll be ceding it to the crown. And
Gahande, I suspect there are many white people watching us right now who assume that there are great benefits to having a status card. And I wonder if you could weigh in on that and tell us if that is in fact the case.
It's just a card. Many people think that the card gives you great benefits in terms of tax reductions and whatnot. It really doesn't. Like anybody else, I pay taxes. I work here in Ottawa at Carleton University. That card really doesn't help me in terms of reducing, purchase price on items and things like that. And to me, that tax card is a symbol of colonial occupation. It's a symbol of the oppression of our people. And we are forced to take that. We are forced to apply for these cards and prove who we are in that system, in that other system. But it really doesn't do very much. And it seems to have a lot of weight in terms of non-Indigenous eyes and those who covet them.
All right, let me introduce another controversy that has been all over the media of late, and that has to do with Carrie Bourassa, noted health researcher, University of Saskatchewan. She is currently on leave because the Métis ancestry that she claimed to have is now being questioned. And I want to go back to Drew Hayden-Taylor, again, writing in the Globe and Mail in that same article. He said, people, settlers, if I must be blunt, show up and casually assume the mantle of indigeneity, sometimes even more successfully than those they imitate. That's what riles up our people. Just because you might know how to dance at an intertribal, make a decent bannock, that's a kind of bread, and get beaten up by the police doesn't make you Indigenous. It's so much more than that. To me, indigeneity is a combination of both nature and nurture. Let's unpack that. Catherine, what do you think he meant by all that?
That you do see, particularly in professional circles, academic circles, and in the arts, people who have claimed, as it appears Dr. Bourassa has done, claimed an indigeneity that's vague and turns out to be inaccurate. And it's because the foundational premise is inaccurate and untrue, everything you build on top of it, it doesn't matter how much you learn, everything you build on top of it is built on that really shaky, illegitimate foundation. So it means that the identity that you've built for yourself professionally, academically, and personally in a lot of cases, it's based on a lie. And that's very problematic. It's problematic for the people who you're claiming to be a member, or where you claim citizenship. It's problematic for other Indigenous people. And I think it's first and foremost problematic for the individual, for the actual individual. They it's the structure that they built their life around has no integrity. And that's a huge problem for them.
Veldon, I'm not sure how to put this other than to ask, are there people in your experience who kind of fetishize indigeneity?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't it's difficult to comment on the personality type, but you see them substitute the sort of skillful emulation, the parody and caricature that they produce for themselves of just almost as exactly what Drew had mentioned in his article. Is they become skillful performances, a whole production with oftentimes really fraudulent personas that they develop for themselves with a fraudulent backstory. and the arts and academia are particularly bad. Their institutions are so spectacularly poor at understanding and just accepting anyone that it embraces charlatans. So you can have skillful individuals who are deceiving other people and making these brazen misrepresentations of what it involves to be Indigenous. So no matter what sort of food or dress they put on, like they put on the feathers and the leather, and they think that's enough, that they can convince others. But it goes back to the idea of claiming or interfering with the distribution of benefits and burdens, especially the ongoing dispossession of Indigenous peoples, like I mentioned the Algonquins here, but it goes on elsewhere too. So claiming rights which they don't really have, and furthering the colonialism of Indigenous peoples.
Well, you say it goes on elsewhere, and it does remind me of the example, I can't remember how many years ago now, maybe 10, where a woman who was the head of the NAACP was white, but claimed she was black because she felt black and she headed a black organization. And, Catherine, the answer to this question may be obvious, but why do you find that so problematic?
Well, as I said earlier, it's based on something that is just factually untrue. And it's also a manifestation of absolute privilege to think that as a member of the dominant culture, the colonizing culture, that you can just step in and claim for your own that which does not belong to you, does not belong to your family, and then get the benefits that is in the sense of belonging and identity, without actually the accountability. In the case of Indigenous people, we are deeply, deeply accountable to our people, to our nations, and within our territories and outside of them. That's what I believe anyway. And if you don't have that accountability, then you certainly shouldn't be claiming any entitlement.
Gotcha. Gahande, are you seeing more people in your experience legitimately trying to connect with whatever indigeneity they have in themselves?
I am. I receive messages through Facebook often from people, family, people who say they're part of my family, the Wide Horn family or the Miller family, and they want to know who they are. I think that's one of the things that we're grappling with here, is that people are wanting a place to belong. Even Europeans who came here are dispossessed from their own lands, and claiming another identity or claiming an identity is part of that effort to belong somewhere. And Indigenous peoples, we have a long history. We have traditions. We have ceremonies. We have stories that place us here, and we know who we are, and we know where we belong. And people want a little piece of that. On the other side of things, you have those who want access to the large funds that are made available to Indigenous people to go to school, living on reserve, access to funding for housing, things like that. I mean, it's not a great story there, but I think those are the two things that we're grappling with is the two different ideas around claiming and access to money.
Having said that, Veldon, how much do you worry about the future of First Nations in Canada if current rules mean that fewer people are going to have citizenship in the future?
Well, we're examining that right now in my own community, the Algonquins Pikwakanagan. So part of the modern treaty negotiations have opened up to explore self-government, and one of the proposals being put forward is a new citizenship code, which wouldn't be reliant upon necessarily, proving some sort of blood quantum or Indian status. So getting rid of that and having a non-terminal sort of generation is that you wouldn't ever breed yourself out of existence, because as it stands, the demographic projections for my little small community of 3,200 status Indians, it's going to decline, and we will cease to exist probably by the end of the century, perhaps, with the rate of what they would call, and use air quotes around it, out marriage, as it were. So having non-status produce offspring and progeny with our membership. So yeah, it's the eventuality that was worked into the whole calculus of things.
Catherine, we've got about
a very, very problematic issue.
Indeed.
I just want to point out something that, we do have mechanisms in our traditional governance systems to address these issues. For example, in the Gaya-Narikoa, we have the adoption procedures that ask you to learn how to be accountable to the community of people, to the clan that adopts you. It takes 3 generations for someone to come back in and their descendants learn the language, learn the culture, learn the ceremonies, all of these things that strengthen the community as a whole. And, you know, we have those mechanisms. They're already there. They've been used in the past, and they've been erased through colonization. I think it's the time is now to re-engage with our traditional ways and see where can we make this fit? How can we make this work within this century?
That feels like a great place to leave this discussion. I want to thank the 3 of you for coming in tonight and helping us understand all of these very complicated issues so much better. Catherine Hensel, Veldon Coburn, Gahande Horn-Miller. I'm grateful to the 3 of you. Thank you.
Sure.
And that is the agenda for Thursday, January 13th, 2022. Could the Omicron variant be the beginning of the end of this pandemic? Nam Kiwanuka will look into that tomorrow. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org. And Nam, we'll see you tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
The Agenda is always on. To catch up on conversations from this week or any week, visit our website, tvo.org/theagenda, or our YouTube page at youtube.com/theagenda. It's all there for whenever you want to watch.
Since the beginning of time, we've been trying to save time.
No matter how rich you are, no matter your intelligence, no matter your socioeconomic status, everyone has 24 hours in a day.
We like things to be cheap, we like things to be immediate, and we like to save time.
Can we ever be fast enough?
Any time-saving invention that comes out, they tout it as the next greatest thing. It's going to save us so much time. We'll all be sitting around with all this time we won't know what to do with. And that never happens.
And the inventions that have been perfected for us are attempts